Welcome to the Phillip Wylie Show. Take a look behind the curtain of professional hacking and hear compelling discussions with guests from diverse backgrounds who share a common curiosity and passion for challenges and their job. And now, here's your host, offensive security professional, educator, mentor, and author, Phillip Wylie.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Phillip Wylie Show. Today I'm joined by Naveen Sunkavally from Horizon 3 AI. We're colleagues at the company and he has a really cool story. So, a lot of the people I bring on, kind of start out on the offensive side or cybersecurity, but he's got a really cool story about how he started out. And if I get the story correct, you kind of went above and beyond from what you originally wanting to do and embrace more of the offensive security side. But I'll let you say that story for you to share. So welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Phil. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. You got a really cool story. I mean, back when I was talking to some Tony and he was sharing some of the different stories, and I thought, yeah, this would be a really good story. Need to share, because one of the things, there's a lot of people that tune in to the podcast that are either trying to break into cybersecurity, move from some other area of cybersecurity, and these stories help motivate and inspire people. And it's really interesting. I had one episode that I did with a former colleague from my AutoCAD days, and it's one of the episodes some of you get a ton of feedback or a ton of people comment on, but I've had some people comment because they were CAD drafters and they were wanting to move into cybersecurity, and the story encouraged them. So I'm pretty sure people are going to get some good advice from you and inspired by your story.
Awesome. Yeah, happy to talk about it.
So I asked my guests at the beginning to share their hacker origin story. So if you wouldn't mind sharing your hacker origin story, kind of where you started up until where you are today.
Yeah. So I'll talk about my current role at Horizon 3. So I'm a software engineer at Horizon 3. I've been with the company since the beginning. So I'm one of the founding engineers. And day to day, my job is software engineering. But what I work on is our attack platform. So Horizon 3 has a product called Node Zero. Node Zero is a pen testing platform, enables clients to basically test their networks and their infrastructure in a manner similar to what a human pen tester or a real world attacker would do. And so a lot of my time is spent building out the attack platform that operationalizes various attacker techniques, adding new exploits, and so forth. So that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years, and it's been a blast. In terms of my hacker origin story, I kind of, feel like an imposter calling myself a hacker. I would say I'm kind of a late bloomer. I am a software engineer by trade, and that's what I've been doing for 25 years. And that is my day-to-day job. Now, I happen to have worked on a lot of cybersecurity products throughout my career. So I started working on defensive products. I was part of a startup called Vontu. I don't know if you're familiar with it, in the data loss prevention space. They got acquired by Symantec way back when. And I joined RSA Security. I was there for 10 years, worked on a lot of different R&D for a lot of different products. So they have something called Archer, which is in the governance, risk, and compliance space. NetWitness, which is their threat detection product. Secure ID, which is their flagship authentication access product. And that was all working on defensive products and just R&D. I would say during my last few years at RSA, I kind of had an awakening of sorts, you could say, like a mid-career crisis that turned me on to offensive security. And it was kind of a couple of different factors that I think led me down to that path. So one, kind of the feeling of, I mentioned the word imposter, like I'm in the cybersecurity industry, I'm doing development for cybersecurity products, but I couldn't, things that I thought a hacker should be able to do were things I couldn't do. Like if I wanted to exploit a stack buffer overflow vulnerability, I should be able to do that. I didn't know how to do that. And so there was a big gap in my mind from being a developer to what I thought hackers could actually do. And so there's just a curiosity there and kind of just feeling like I'm in this industry, but kind of tangentially, not really doing it. Second, working on all these defensive products, I kind of also had a realization that I didn't really feel like any of them were actually working. Like I worked on all these products all these years, Yet every single day in the news, some other client is getting breached and something's going on. If everyone has all these security tools, why is the same problem happening over and over again? And so, and I remember at RSA, there was a big breach that happened around the 2011 timeframe. I was actually there when that happened. I don't know if you recall, but there was like a Chinese APT that came in and basically stole the secure ID seeds. And then that enabled them to pivot to attack other organizations like Lockheed Martin and so forth. Huge story. It was one of the early major high profile breaches that took place in the industry. And then since then, there's been so many other breaches, but that was like, kind of, I think, a bellwether moment in terms of, wow, this can really happen. And I remember there was chatter at the time like, hey, we have data loss prevention products. Why didn't they prevent these hackers taking our data out of the network? And anyone who knows what a data loss prevention product is knows that it's mainly a compliance tool. Like, anyone can bypass it trivially. So it's just, in my mind, there's a huge disconnect between the offensive and the defensive side. And that's what I was feeling. And also in my career at that point, I had already kind of progressed up the ranks. I'd gone into senior management in software engineering, but like, I was dissatisfied also as a manager. Like, I'm not really naturally a people person. So like, having to work with people as my day-to-day job all the time, and that's all I do, versus actually writing code and design stuff, like that was not my happy place. So it was kind of the confluence of all those factors that kind of pushed me in the direction of, I really want to understand what offensive security is about. And so for me, it was, okay, I got my day job, but I'm going to study now, mid-career again, and make a pivot and just really try to understand pen testing, hacker techniques. And it's just a lot of grinding, right? Just a lot of learning. I got my OSCP. It was kind of the early days of Hack the Box and CTFs there. So I got involved in that community, spent a lot of time there just learning and really just grinding it out, like late nights. Kids would be asleep and I would be working on boxes and seeing what I could pwn and stuff. So it was pretty fun. And for me, it really opened up like so much more. Like, I realized what a big mismatch there is between what people think on the defensive side versus what's actually happening on the offensive side. And then also for me as a developer, just shifting from thinking about code to like thinking about systems and networks. Like, if all you do is write code and programs and applications, like, you don't have that perspective and you don't realize what's, the bigger picture. And so that was really, really enlightening for me. Kind of fast forward to the end of 2019, I had gotten my OSCP. I was still really into kind of learning about offensive security, progressing there. And then Tony and Snehal just happened to reach out to me on LinkedIn. It was actually kind of a cold call. Tony, as you know, is based in Fort Bragg, and a bunch of early folks were in North Carolina. And as Snehal said, he was just seeing who are software engineers that also had an offensive security background in the North Carolina area. And I think I was the only one that showed up. So I went, met them, was convinced that, Horizon 3 was a good place to be, both the team and the product. Putting on my software development hat and having gone through kind of what offensive security was for the last couple of years, I could see that, what people on the outside might perceive as kind of like voodoo or black magic, like there's nothing really that special there. It's just something you got to learn. And people are already using all sorts of scripts and stuff. So there's no reason that a lot of it can't be automated. And so kind of putting my software engineering hat on and kind of combining it with the offensive security vision that Snehal and Tony had, like, it made tons of sense to me. And so that brought me to Horizon 3. And it's been a really fun ride. Like, I have an awesome job where I'm basically trying to build the best hacking machine on the planet. And I get to do that every day. So it's really fun.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing because before I joined Horizon 3, I didn't think you could automate pen testing that much because I'd worked for companies and we had some wrappers that would take a combination of different open source pen testing tools and run them. And that was pretty much it. I didn't think it could be automated. I was really surprised to see how much it's been automated. So just kind of thinking along the lines of offensive security careers and just kind of seeing how you kind of pivoted, gaining that knowledge. For someone that wants to get into offensive security, what would you recommend as far as learning the trade?
Yeah, I think, as I consider myself a late bloomer. I think to do well in offensive security or just cybersecurity in general, I look at a lot of Reddit posts and stuff like that. How do I break into cybersecurity? It's one of those fields that I don't think you can just jump into directly. You've got to have a base of knowledge. And for me, I could write code, which is awesome because, you know, everything runs on code at the end of the day. But being able to understand how programs are written, and being good at that, like I'm very confident I could, write any program I wanted to. But that helps me for doing things like vulnerability research, which I do on the side, or like, you know, understanding how attacker techniques work. In cybersecurity as well, like systems and networking is a huge part of it. I think you have to have a base of knowledge in some of these areas before jumping straight into cybersecurity. So whether it's kind of like a strong IT background or whether it's a development background, like at least from my experience, I'm kind of biased, but I think starting from some base like that and then moving into cybersecurity is I think a fruitful path and a path for better success.
Yeah, that's great advice because you see, and it's interesting because whenever I got into offensive security, this is after I'd spent over 6 years as a sysadmin, which is the probably most beneficial experience I had before getting into pen testing, and then spent like over 7 or 8 years in network security the first year and a half, and then application security. And there really was an option. Pen testing was very rare. It was one of those very rare jobs. You didn't even see that many jobs like that, and it's grown. So you really kind of had to pay your dues or learn the basics before you, because they're really what you didn't know about the job. And so that definitely paid off. And I know it's got to be difficult nowadays when people see that there is the possibility they could jump right into it if they can get the right skills or so. But back when I was getting started out, you couldn't do that. So it's really interesting. One of the things I see weakness wise, people trying to get into pen testing, is a lot of people I've been familiar with worked in IT and had IT backgrounds, but it seems like a lot of what people are kind of missing out on or have the biggest difficulties with is the coding piece, knowing how to script, because that was one of the toughest things for me on the OSCP, was just doing, going through and taking the vulnerabilities, the exploits, and modifying or creating the exploits to work in that environment. That was one of the toughest things for me.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of funny because I had that part down, but the other side was harder for me. So like the system side, which was probably like second nature to you, and like
Yes.
networking, and like I was like, oh, I got to do like proxy chains and figure out these reverse shells, and like how do I like port forward, like all these things, which I think people with the networking background, it's all like straightforward and obvious. Like that's the stuff I had to pick up quite a bit of, and like just even at the operating system level, like tools on Linux and Windows systems and how they can be used or abused. That was all new to me, like completely. I never thought in those terms. Someone with your background or coming in with IT and understanding all these tool sets that are already in the environment and used for various reasons. Yeah, definitely had a leg up.
So based on
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like even stuff like Active Directory, stuff like that, I didn't really know that very well. I've learned a ton about it, but like I haven't had to set up. I'd never had to set up like an Active Directory domain controller environment, join machines to the domain, like stuff that you would take for granted and be like kind of 101 kind of stuff for an IT person. Like I never did. So that there was tons of learning there.
So as far as like the application pen testing, did that seem to come a little more natural for you since you understood development?
Yeah, especially web application pen testing. And I find that I'm pretty good at that when I can spend time doing vulnerability research. Kind of my most fruitful findings are when I can just find the source code to an application and just kind of do a white box assessment and just open it up, look at all the code, quickly figure out what are all the routes in this application that user can access, whether they're intended or unintended, and looking at various ways to abuse endpoints. Like that is for me very natural because it's all code at the end of the day. So I've just gotten very adept at reading code very quickly over many years.
So for someone that doesn't have that coding background that's wanting an offensive security career, do you recommend them learning how to script or code?
Definitely, yeah. I think scripting, coding is, I would say, almost essential at this point, especially the direction is going towards more and more automation. And so automation relies on code. As you mentioned, 5 years ago, people would not have thought of pen testing as something that could be automated. And I remember early on, those were some of the objections we were getting from clients, like, you can't automate this. And it's true, there are certain layers that are hard to automate. But over time, more and more stuff is getting automated. And starting at the infrastructure level, so many of the basic attacks that, pen testers are taught, like fire up responder, man in the middle, some traffic, and like various things like that. There's so many of those tactics that they're not really that special. Like you could automate all those things. And so we've just been going further and further up the stack. So I think it's very useful for people to learn how to automate those attacks. And that's what real world hackers are doing also. They're automating so much stuff too. And especially with, all this AI, LLMs kind of stuff going on that, I think the trend is going to continue.
Yeah, it's even kind of interesting because some bug hunters that do bug bounty have been doing automation for a while. They'll set up, their servers, their VPS to go out and scan these domains and stuff, and they'll find the information to go back and dig in more virtually. But the whole automation thing is kind of interesting to see how that's going, because the interesting thing about pen testing was going back to things being manual. And even before, even at one time, you didn't have vulnerability scanners, you didn't have Metasploit. So it was even more manual. And, this, using automation is kind of like automated pen testing, I think, is like the next evolution in pen testing, because at one time you didn't have these vulnerability scanners, Metasploit, and this type of things. But now you wouldn't imagine doing a large scale pen test all manually. It would take forever without doing some kind of automation.
Definitely, yeah. So, I mean, just in terms of scale, automation is pretty much your only option, right? Like if you got thousands of assets, then you got to have some level of automation there. I would say that doesn't mean that there isn't a place for people. I mean, there is. It's just going to be further up the stack. So, like web application pen testing, I think is still something that your automation hasn't quite gotten there yet. But now, recently, over the last year, I think the narrative is poised to change on that front too, I think. So if you look at some of the startups out there who are investigating using LLMs for stuff like web application testing, I know they're just very early and kind of just prototypes, but they're pretty cool. Like and even 5 years ago, I didn't think that web application pen testing would be that easy to automate. But now seeing kind of the direction that LLMs and generative AI is going, like I could see a future where that does happen. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean everything. Like it just raises the bar for when a human would be involved and add like value versus the automation.
So as far as people always asking, if AI or automation is going to take all the jobs away from pen testers, kind of what's your opinion on that?
I think people should focus on the automation aspects of it, right? Like there's going to be a need to automate and come up. There's always new techniques and stuff coming out. And that's where I think a lot of the the value is. Yeah. I mean, I think folks have to find a niche where as a human they're adding significant value over the automation. And so either that or they're doing, they're involved in the automation process itself. And there's plenty of areas outside of infrastructure pen testing, which I think, that's what Horizon 3 focuses on, but like web application pen testing, bug bounty stuff, like it's still like, I think it's still going to be human driven for a while. But, I think the gap is closing and, 5 to 10 years, I'm not confident that it's going to be the same place it is right now.
Yeah, some very good advice. So really encouraging for people to get out there and start learning some automation and AI. So what are your opinions on AI? Because I know that Horizon 3 leverages that to an extent, but I think the cool thing is it's not the whole thing. I've seen people out there that are trying to automate pen testing purely with AI and not really doing a lot of what we do in the background.
Yeah. And so there's AI as like the recent tools, and again, just more at the prototype level, I would say, over the last year with all the LLM stuff coming about. I don't know if that approach is necessarily the best approach long term. Like, so the Copilot tools I've seen is I need to, what should I do? The AI will say, okay, you need to find hosts in the network, run Nmap, and then maybe it'll go run it too, and then come back with some results. And then the human has to respond, okay, now what's next? Like, tell me what ports are open, blah, blah. So it's just kind of a back and forth. So I've seen those kind of tools. I think the big gap that's missing in those tools today is that there's still a ton of subject matter expertise that needs to be encoded in like that process, that even if you've got an AI that understands the internet, it's not going to necessarily know what the best nmap command is to run unless it's told very specifically by a subject matter expert. This is how you need to do host discovery, right? And so like at Horizon 3, even something simple as host discovery, we've iterated on that quite a bit internally to figure out, okay, this is the way you do host discovery. And it varies, right? Based on the size of the network and like what flags you pass in. Like, I could be wrong. I don't think you can just ask ChatGPT to say, okay, give me the best nmap command to find hosts in the network. There's a bit of an art to that and understanding how the tools work, right? So there's a gap there between what kind of a general AI can do versus what a subject matter expert can do. And so today, I think that AI has to be heavily guided to be useful. And that's what you see with a lot of the coding tools as well, right? So a lot of the feedback there is that it's great for senior coders who actually know how to prompt the AI in the right way to get it answers that make sense, and who can actually review it and say, okay, this actually does make sense. If you're someone who doesn't know how to code and you're going to try to use AI, yeah, you might be able to put some low code kind of prototypes together, but I don't think you can easily build like a production system. And so I think that's where the gap is right now. So there is tons of value in that subject matter expertise. And that's what we're exploring at Horizon 3 is how do we marry our knowledge and stuff we built up over the last 5 years with the data we have and kind of the potential for these new AI tools.
And I think that's so important, the data, because how many pen tests has Horizon 3 performed now? Over 100 something thousand, isn't it?
It's approaching that. Yeah, it might have exceeded it. And that's one of the cool things as a SaaS platform doing pen testing. We have accumulated a lot of knowledge and a lot of trials that we have. And the awesome thing is we get feedback running at scale, and we can see what worked, what didn't work, adjust our tactics and techniques kind of whenever we want, right? Because we're a SaaS platform, and that's awesome for me to be able to run experiments almost, not in a way we're going to bring down environments and stuff, but just experiments in terms of new tactics, seeing what works or doesn't work. That's really the benefit of having all the data we have and kind of being a cloud-based platform.
Yeah, that's kind of nice to be able to figure, because you think of some consulting companies, the amount of pen tests they've probably done in the years they've been around to be able to get all that data and be able to use it to keep continually improving the process is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is awesome. And so like, I think that's one of the biggest benefits of our platform is we're not stuck in time, right? With a set of techniques we learned 5 years ago. We are always continually evolving and changing and exploring what other new options are there, even if they're not well known or publicized. So that's awesome.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is this, to get your opinion, say like someone's worked in cybersecurity, offensive security side. So how can someone get into vulnerability research?
If they've already been on the cybersecurity side. So I think,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, so for me, I'm kind of biased, but having come from a development background, the most natural shift for me was to go into white box vulnerability research. And that involves just, decompiling code or looking at open source software where the code is already known and then just trying to understand and analyze it. But still, like when you're just getting into it, it can be kind of daunting. And I didn't really think about doing it till one day I was working on some code for Horizon 3 and one of our packages. I was just exploring it, and I found happened to just find an XML external entities vulnerability. Well, we care a lot about our packages and code and stuff. So like I reported it, and there's kind of a adrenaline rush, I would say, that you get from finding something like that, reporting it, getting a CVE. And so it just kind of started me down that journey of seeing how I could expand from there. I would say there's a huge attack surface that people don't normally go after, but that's kind of what I found to be my sweet spot. So like everyone knows about like the Avantis and the Fortinets and so forth. But there's a whole range of other applications that, you know, many people have not even looked at, but they're commonly used by companies. You remember Papercut, right? So back in 2023, ransomware attackers like abused Papercut and just exploited so many companies through that. I don't think anyone prior to 2023 knew what Papercut was. Like, like no one in the InfoSec community, no one. Like, you know, maybe some IT people did, but like, it's an example of a kind of this under the radar application that's widely used, but probably didn't get that many eyes from a security perspective. So like, I would encourage someone coming up to kind of look for those kind of applications where you can make an impact, but also it's kind of under the radar and it's not necessarily something that everyone is trying to look at. And so that means, you know, there may not be a bug bounty associated with it, but just for learning the process and understanding how it works, and also trying to find it, like for me, making an impact with the vulnerability that I find is important, right? Because at the end of the day, there's so many vulnerabilities, like, I don't know, what is it now, 200,000 or something like that. And only a small percentage get exploited in the wild. And I'm looking for the vulnerabilities that could possibly get exploited in the wild. So there's certain metrics I use for that. Like they have to be, you know, there has to be a path for an unauthenticated user to abuse something and then maybe chain it to some other vulnerability. So I would encourage people to look for those kind of high impact paths in lesser known applications that are still widely deployed. And then just get into the practice of reading source code. So that's how I do it.
And so, you know, we kind of have touched a little bit on AI. So what do you think about when I saw a LinkedIn post where someone was talking about, you know, now that we've got AI and people are using it for development, do you think that's going to introduce a lot more vulnerabilities with people using AI?
I think it can. Yeah, for sure. Because if you have unskilled, you know, people who don't have a development background, junior developers trying to use these AI tools, like I think it's kind of a joke, right? Like in Stack Overflow, sometimes people copy and paste vulnerabilities directly from Stack Overflow into there. Now that's how it used to be. Now people have been replaced, like Stack Overflow's usage is going down. The AI tools are kind of replacing that. And it's kind of the same issue. It's like, what is the AI doing? It's just using all the data it has on the internet to come up with probabilistic sequences of tokens. And so there's going to be vulnerabilities in that code too, if it's sourcing it off the internet where there's already vulnerable codes. Yeah. I don't know if it's worse than it is now, but yeah, I think it's definitely kind of the same problem. It's no different.
Yeah, that's interesting comparing it to Stack Overflow, because I never really thought about people copying vulnerable code from there and using it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely a thing.
So we're getting down towards the end of the episode. Is there anything you'd like to share or discuss before we close it out?
No, it's been awesome being here. I think the future is bright. We're in really exciting, interesting times with the direction of AI in general. Like if you look at industry trends, there was just a report today from Mandiant that came out talking about the rise of zero-day exploitation. Yeah, there's so many interesting trends in the industry. So I think cybersecurity is a really exciting place to be. And then there's going to be a lot of fruitful work to do for many, many years.
Yeah, based on that thing, the quote from Mandiant about the vulnerability research being really needed, it's very promising for folks that want to get into offensive security or security research.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thanks for joining me. It's good to hear a little bit more about your story and hear some of your advice. So thanks for joining.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Phillip Wylie Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, to learn more about Phillip, go to thehackermaker.com and connect with him on LinkedIn and Twitter @Phillip Wylie. Until next time.